Okay, great. I think we got this technical problem fixed up. Okay, so what is Arimaa? Basically, technically, it's a two-player perfect information abstract strategy game, but that probably doesn't tell you much. So, what is it in terms of geek speak? It's basically, well, it's a game that was recently published by Z-Man Games, and it's an abstract game which I think has a high replay value. You know, it's kind of a game where you could play it 1,000 times and still feel that you haven't mastered it. And I can kind of say this because we actually do have people that have played it thousands of times, and including myself. And you know, we still feel that you know, we have so much more to learn. And it's a game that has fairly simple rules. You know, you could learn the rules in just a few minutes, and the rules are fairly consistent and intuitive. And it was designed to be playable with a chess set, easy to learn, difficult for computers, and interesting to play. Those are kind of the goals that I had when I, you know, set out to make the game. So one of the questions that I often get as soon as people hear me say that it's playable with a chess set is, well, is Arimaa a chess variant? Well, it kind of depends on your definition of what a chess variant is. If you know, you say that anything that could be played with a chess set is a variant, then yes, definitely Arimaa is a chess variant. But if you want to maintain some of the rules of chess, like different pieces moving differently, pieces capturing by replacing the opponent's piece, even, you know, if you want to keep the goal of the game, then, you know, Arimaa is definitely not a chess variant. It basically changes all the rules, and it in fact introduces some new game mechanics that, you know, you probably haven't seen in other games, and, you know, it leads to some very interesting kind of strategic options. Okay, so why was Arimaa created to begin with? Well, the short answer is that, you know, I sort of created it to prove a point. I wanted to show that, you know, humans can still outsmart computers using nothing more than a standard chess set. And, you know, if you think about it, that actually is a fairly hard thing to do, especially, you know, in this day and age where computers are so fast, and you know, doing symbolic manipulation for a computer is very easy, you know, compared to a human who sits there just staring at the board, while the computer can actually, you know, make the changes inside its memory and check out all these different positions and evaluate them. So it's to be able to defeat a computer using something, you know, that's as small as a chess set. It is actually a fairly hard thing to do. So why am I interested in showing that, you know, humans are able to outsmart computers anyway? So there's a bit of a long story to that, and the story is rooted in chess, and in particular in the history of developing machines to play chess. So ever since computers have been around, people have, you know, wanted to use them to see if they could build systems that can play chess and possibly even defeat, you know, the top chess players. You know, chess is basically viewed as a sort of an intellectual activity, and so, you know, building systems to play chess is sort of something that the AI researchers really look at as sort of a test bed. And so there's been a lot of work done in that area, and you know, it started like in the 1950s, and at that time, you know, people were just barely able to build computers that could play chess. And then in the 1960s, they got to a level where the programs were starting to beat some of the beginners. And then in the 70s, they got to a level where, they were able to beat tournament players. And in the 80s, they got to a level where they're beating grandmasters. And finally, in 1997, IBM put a lot of effort behind developing a system to play chess, and they built a machine which was dedicated to playing chess called Deep Blue. And there was a match between IBM's Deep Blue and the then world champion Gary Kasparov. And this is a very highly publicized match, and I'm sure you must have heard of it, and most people know about it. But what a lot of people don't know is that about 200 years ago, there was a fellow by the name of Wolfgang von Kempelen back in 1770 who also built a machine that could play chess. He beat IBM to that. And in fact, the machine was called the Turk, I think because, you had this virtual opponent that was a Turban and maybe he was Turkish or something, but it was called the Turk. And it played very well. In fact, it beat many, well-known dignitaries of the time, like Benjamin Franklin and Napoleon. And they would take this machine on tours, through Europe and U.S. and do demonstrations, and they would open up the machine and show what's inside, and convince everybody that, hey, look, there isn't anybody inside. This machine's playing chess. And this went on for 50 years until it was finally revealed that there was, in fact, a human inside the machine that was making the moves. So when you look at this, you say, well, hey, this is just a big hoax. It's not a machine that plays chess. All of that chess knowledge comes from the person sitting inside the machine. And this is not an intelligent machine. It's just made to look like it's playing chess on the surface. And so when IBM this long history of trying to build machines that can play chess, IBM sort of put an end to that when they built Deep Blue, and it defeated Gary Kasparov. And certainly IBM used a computer, and so definitely there was no human inside of it, or was there? So this kind of set off sort of a debate about what intelligence is, and is Deep Blue an intelligent machine or not? And so of course there wasn't physically anybody inside of the machine, but do you need to be physically inside of it to be considered to be inside the computer? I mean, it depends on your definition of what it means to be inside a computer, right? So what about if you just store all your knowledge inside of it? Could that be considered being inside the machine? Deep Blue certainly didn't come up with what it valued the pieces. Like it didn't know a rook should be worth more than a knight unless somebody programmed it. So there was a whole lot of expert knowledge stored inside of it. So in that sense, people have argued that it's kind of like the Turk. And if you look at it that way, you could say that there was a whole team of people inside of Deep Blue, not just one person. But it's not that simple. Even though these people added a lot of their chess knowledge and taught Deep Blue how to play this, that knowledge was churned by a lot of complex algorithms. And the machine actually did make some very novel moves, and made moves that were much better than what its creators would do. And in fact, it could defeat all of its creators. It had transcended its creators. And a lot of times it made moves that even they would not be able to predict or understand why it made them. And it looked as if, it had a mind of its own. And so, there's another argument that says maybe Deep Blue was intelligent. In fact, Gary Kasparov thought that it actually played like a human. There was, one point where he said, he thought that some of the moves made by Deep Blue were actually being made by a person. And so in that sense, Deep Blue passed the Turing Test for chess. And if you're not familiar with what the Turing Test is, basically in the field of AI, there's this concept for testing if something is intelligent or not, and it's called a Turing Test because it was proposed by a mathematician named Alan Turing. And the way it works is you basically have two chat sessions going on. One of the sessions is with a human, the other session is with a computer. But you don't know which one is which. And you can interact, between the two and ask questions, look at the responses, but you don't know which session is the computer and which is the human, and you have to try to figure out which is which. So if you, consistently get that wrong, then the machine is considered to be intelligent. Either that or you're considered not intelligent. But I suppose you could always blame it on the other human and say, he wasn't giving me very human-like answers and confused me into thinking that he was the machine, And that's a very human thing to do, blame it on the other guy. But it's all, it's a test that's very much based on perception. So it basically says if it perceives that, something is intelligent, then it must be intelligent. So in that sense, Deep Blue could be considered to be intelligent. But then, so what? I mean, it's only appearing that way, and it appears that way because it's running so fast. And, even those complex algorithms were all programmed by humans, and humans came up with those. So, this debate can just go on and on. Is Deep Blue intelligent or isn't it? And it's kind of like one of those things where, it might never end. So, there's good arguments on both sides. But, I think what's really difficult is really trying to define what intelligence is. Because it's such a vague concept, and it encompasses so much. I mean, so you could ask, is your dog intelligent, right? I mean, most people would say that their pets are intelligent because, you can teach them to obey commands, and they understand your feelings and emotions to a certain extent, and they do a lot of things which, I think if, we build a system that could be, it could interact with us like a dog can, we would say, wow, that's a pretty intelligent system. But, of course, the dog can't even communicate with us directly, so it wouldn't even be able to take a Turing test. Now, on the other hand, you might ask, is your boss intelligent? Okay, and so even though your boss would be able to chat with you from the other side, maybe some of the things that, you think that they say is not very intelligent. So, what is intelligence? It's such a hard concept to define. I kind of like to just take a practical approach to things. I mean, do we really need to define intelligence to create intelligence? I mean, why can't we just, take things one step at a time, like evolution, and just set up harder and harder goals for ourselves and, try to achieve them. And as we do that, I think somewhere along the line we'll cross some point where, we'll have machines that are undeniably intelligent, and, it won't be like, oh, because you did this task, you're now intelligent. Getting back to the Deep Blue match. So after I saw that match, I kind of really felt sorry for Gary Kasparov. I mean, 'cause for one thing, I used to play chess a lot with those chess computers, like the Fidelity chess computers, and I know how agonizing it is to lose when you're when you're trying to win really hard against the computer, and you know, this is such a publicized match, and you know, Kasparov lost that. So I really felt for him, and you know, I thought that IBM should have at least given him a rematch. You know, he gave him a rematch when they asked for it, and I thought it would just be good sportsmanship if they did the same for him. But instead, IBM went and, you know, dismantled the computer, which I thought was really bad. But you know, on the other hand, though, if they did give him a rematch, there's a good chance that maybe he would not have won again. You know, it was kind of like the time had come. You know, computers had gotten extremely good at chess, and so but it's not just because that Deep Blue was more intelligent than Kasparov, but just that computers had gotten so fast and they'd gotten to a level where, you know, they could outcalculate him. So, you know, I started thinking about this, and I thought the problem is, you know, I mean, not even so much that he didn't get a rematch, but it's chess. I mean, he can't, I don't think he's going to continue to win if he keeps, you know, if we try to beat computers at chess. So, you know, I thought we need a game that is like chess, or could be played with a chess set, but is more difficult for computers. And, you know, why can't we make something like that? It shouldn't be that hard. So, you know, having some background in computers, I know how computers play chess. And I started thinking about this, and I thought, you know, we just need to increase the branching factor. I mean, chess, you know, has about 30, 35 moves per turn. And if we just, you know, expand that a whole lot, then it would be very difficult for computers to think, you know, deep. And that's really how computers are able to beat humans, is because they, you know, think so much more deeper, I think. So, you know, so my first attempt was just to try to increase the branching factor of chess. And the easiest way to do that is if you allowed multiple moves per turn. So instead of just say, like, you know, you move your knight, you could move your knight, and then you could also move your bishop or some other piece. And so you could say, okay, well, let's try it with 2 moves and then see how that works, and then let's try it with 3 moves per turn, see how that works. And you know, I tried this a little bit, and what I found was that the game actually seemed a lot harder to comprehend, and it probably was actually better for computers than it was for humans, because it just the space of the game changed so much from move to move that a human wouldn't really be able to make any kind of judgmental move in that. It becomes too tactical. So I gave up. I thought, well, chess is gone. You know, there's nothing we can do about it. Anything that you could play on a chess set against a computer, you know, it's just going to play better than you. So I gave up, and then it wasn't until like January of 1999, I sat down one day to try to teach Amir how to play chess, and at the time he was just 4 years old, and he needed some help trying to, even just to learn that, you have to take turns, and he can't really comprehend all the complex movement of the pieces like knights and things like that. So I took out all the pieces and just made it with just a pawn and king, the whole set of pawns and kings. And so these pieces have very simple movement. And I was introducing him to the game this way. And as I was playing that, it occurred to me that, well, what if you did multiple moves with such simple, one-step type moves? And I looked at that, and it did some calculations, and it turns out that even with that, you could really increase the branching factor a lot. And it was like, felt like a aha moment for me. It was like a breakthrough, maybe I just have to throw out my whole notion that I had of trying to keep the chess piece movement and just start over. And, just have very, very simple movements for the pieces, and that way then maybe having multiple moves wouldn't be so difficult for humans to comprehend. So that got me started again. And I was really excited, and I said, hey, Arimaa, you want to, let's create a new game. And you know, wanted to kind of name it after him because, you know, he kind of put me onto it again. And I was thinking, well, his name was kind of backwards, and I said, should we call it Rema? And I think he misheard me and said, what, Arimaa? And I thought, hey, that sounds better. You know, let's call it Arimaa. So we, you know, the first thing we did was name the game. We hadn't even, you know, thought through the details of how it was all going to work out. But, you know, we had a name for it. So all we had to do now was just to figure out, you know, what we were going to do with the capturing and the goal and all that. And I figured that shouldn't take too long. And so I, you know, started play testing various ideas and trying out things with people, and it just, you know, kept going. I thought it'd be done in a weekend, and I thought it'd be done in a week, and you know, there's just so many different ideas that, you know, that you could try, and it just kept going on and on and on. And after a while, people got tired of the play testing, and pretty soon I was play testing by myself. And you know, the thing is, play testing can really become a tedious chore because and every time you change something, you have to see if, you know, how is this game going to feel. Did I mess up something I already had thought was good before? You know, and it's you know, especially if you're doing it all by yourself, it's really difficult. And I was fortunate to have found this program called Billions of Games, and that really helped out a lot. So I spent, I think, all of 1999 trying out various ideas for capturing and various ideas for what the goal should be. You know, should it be score based? Should it be you know, try to capture a certain piece? Should it be, you know, a goal based, trying to get your one of your pieces to the other side? All kinds of things like that. But at the end of that, I still kind of gave up because I just wasn't happy with what was happening, and you know, some things happened in my family that, you know, we were going through a bad time. My father-in-law had been diagnosed with cancer, so you know, I just kind of gave up on it again, and I think I probably would have never came back to it. You know, and year and a half had gone by, and it was September of 2001, and I was cleaning up some files off my hard drive to make some room, and I happened to run across these rules that I had written down again. And as I read through them, I thought, wow, you know, look at all these different things that I had tried. You know, it's just a matter of getting the right combination now. You know, I think I've tried out so many different things. I just have to find, like, what combination will work really well. And so I had this, okay, there we go. So I had this renewed energy to you know, re-experiment with the game again. And I found somebody on the Billions of Games forum. His name is Keith Carter. And he actually was also a game designer, and he helped me with some of the late playtesting of Rema. And you know, after a few more months of playtesting, I came to a version that I thought was really felt right. There was a lot of things that felt right about it. I mean, you know, I just tried to make sure that it didn't have any kind of obvious flaws, and you know, so that the game also kind of felt interesting to play. And beyond that, you know, it's really hard to know what your game is like, you know, because no matter how much you think you've play tested a certain version, you really don't know until you've played like thousands of games with it, and you know, it's been played at, you know, expert levels and things like that. And so it was just a chance that I was taking, that, you know, saying, so here's this good game. But you know, you have to settle on something. eventually I tried to build a website, and it took me about a year to get the website together. And finally, in November 2002, I launched the Rema.com website, and along with it, I offered this challenge for the AI community. Basically saying that, hey, if you can build a program which can defeat the top human Arima player, which I select, then I'll give you $10,000, and this challenge would be good until the year 2020. So I put out this challenge and put up the website kind of simultaneously, and some of the first people that looked at it were actually from the Go community, and they said, why are you creating another game like this and putting out this challenge? Go is already very difficult for computers, and didn't you know about Go? And I said, yeah, I know about Go, but actually, I was trying to shoot for something that could be played on a chess set, and that was the main thing that was important for me, is that this game could be played with a standard chess set. So, some more about the Arima challenge. I'm putting out this challenge, and so what do I hope to achieve with it? Well, I don't know what will come of it, but if it fuels some innovation in the area of artificial intelligence, I'd be very happy. And it's kind of like basic research. You don't know what's going to come of it. Why do we build these billion-dollar colliders, particle colliders? You don't know what the practical application is going to be from that, but it's basic research, and hopefully eventually it leads to something. And that's kind of the thing that you're doing when you do this basic research in something like a game that can be played with, say, a chess set. And there's a quote from Bill Gates that I saw on the internet, which I thought was very interesting. So he actually feels that this is a very important area. So in devising the Arima challenge, there's certain things that I wanted to do which was different than, say, like what I had seen happen with the IBM Gary Kasparov match. So first of all, I wanted this to be a software challenge. I actually feel that computer hardware has gotten to a point where we probably already have sufficient hardware to be able to defeat a human in Arima or most other games. It's just really a matter of having the right software to do that. So I'm trying to set this up as a software challenge, and so I want it to be played on standard off-the-shelf computer hardware, so you're not having to build special purpose hardware to play this thing. So I'll provide the hardware. It's something that you could buy within, say, $1,000. But you just need to provide the software that will run on it. The other thing is I want it to be reproducible. So once it happens, somebody else should also be able to run this and get similar results. I don't want something where you build something in the lab and it's a one-of-a-kind thing, and then if you're not interested in doing anything with it, it disappears. So I wanted it to be reproducible. Another thing is that initially I had it so that you would only play one human, and if you defeated that human, then you won the challenge match. But later on, I realized that it's kind of difficult to just get one human to play this, especially when I'm not paying them or anything, and they're doing this as a big favor, just to defend humanity. We switched to a different format where you now have 3 humans, and the computer needs to win 2 out of 3 games against each of those 3 humans in order to win the challenge. And it also takes some of the pressure off of each of the humans, because there was some people who declined to play in the challenge just because the stakes were kind of high and they didn't want to have that burden all on themselves. So what's the state of the Arima challenge now? Well, we've been doing it since the year 2004, and it's been done each year. So there's been 6 challenge matches, and the gap between computers and humans seems to be increasing. The top human players are actually able to defeat the computers by given a handicap, and then even average players like myself, we're able to defeat the computers. I don't give much of a handicap, but I'm still able to keep up. The first year, I ended up having to defend the challenge match because nobody else would be willing to do it. So I was able to actually defend that. And then recently, in the very last challenge match, the 2009 one, I was a backup in case somebody didn't show up. And it so happened that one of the top players thought his game was on another day, and I ended up having to substitute for him, and I was still able to win that game. So, the challenge match seems to suggest that Arima definitely is a difficult game for computers, and I think in terms of in a comparison to chess, I think Arima sort of takes things back to like the 1970s, where chess used to be in the 1970s, where the computers were able to beat sort of like tournament level players and getting close to maybe beating masters. So I think that's kind of where we're at right now. So to tell you a little bit more about Arima itself and some of the features of Arima, I think I really need to give you a little background on the what the rules of Arima are like. I'm not really going to dwell into it a lot, but just kind of give you some high-level idea of what the rules are like. So there's no fixed starting position in Arima. So the gold player moves first. Instead of white and black, we use gold and silver. And so I'll be referring to it as gold, but that's the player that makes the first move. So the gold player sets up all his pieces, and then that's followed by the silver player, who then sets up all of their pieces, and you set them up on the 2 rows that are closest to you. So the silver player can actually see what gold's setup is while they're doing the setup. And then the movement of the pieces begins, and so the gold player makes the first move, and they get 4 steps per turn. And you can distribute those steps across multiple pieces. And then all pieces move the same way, basically the way rooks move in chess. The only restriction is that the rabbits, which are like the pawns in chess, can't go backwards. Now, if all pieces are moving the same way, then how do you distinguish what the different pieces do? And we're using the same 6 different types of pieces and the same number of those pieces that you have in chess. But so how do you just distinguish what these pieces do if they don't move differently? So there's this notion of stronger and weaker pieces, and so I like to use like elephant, camel, horse, dog, cat, and rabbit. Instead of the chess pieces, just to make it easy to understand which piece is stronger than which. And so what the stronger pieces can do is they basically have an influence over the weaker pieces. So they can actually push a weaker piece out of its square, step into its square, or they can step to a different square and pull a weaker piece into the square where they were. They can also freeze opponents' weaker pieces. So they have this influence. So that's how you distinguish the stronger piece from the weaker piece. And then there's these 4 trap squares. And basically, you can't stand alone on a trap square. You must have a friendly piece adjacent to you in order to be on the trap square. Otherwise, the piece on the trap square is removed from the game. And the goal of the game is basically just to get one of your weakest pieces, which is the rabbit, across the board to the other side. And also, if you have no more rabbits left, or if you're not able to make a legal move, then you lose the game. And a lot of times people ask, like, why did you use this animal theme? I really didn't put a lot of thought into the theme part of the game. I just, picked this because, I just wanted to have it so that somebody who's not familiar with chess could easily distinguish, which piece is stronger than which. And, we considered other things like robots and sumo wrestlers and dinosaurs and things like that, but, just using some common animals seemed like the easiest. And, I also picked it so that it would appeal to my kids. So why is Arimaa hard for computers then? So basically what happens is, with that initial setup where you're allowed to set pieces up the way you want, it allows for, I think over 64 million different combinations of setups. And when you have that kind of a situation, and then you consider then your opponent is also going to do something that, could also be 64 million. You've got 64 million squared different ways that you could have set up in just the first two moves. You're not really going to want to have some opening books to capture all of these different possibilities. So it really hampers computers in that way. And opening books have been one of the things that have helped computers play chess very well. So Arimaa just kind of throws that out the window. And then within the move, being able to take 4 different steps, and even though each of those is just a simple one moving a piece from one square to the next type of a step, it still on average has about 17,000 unique moves that you can do per turn. And if you compare that to about 35 for chess, that's quite a huge jump, and that also becomes a big barrier for trying to do brute force, way of trying to play chess or play Arimaa. And then another aspect is that a game can end without there being any captures at all, and so. You can have all pieces on the board, and then one of the rabbits getting to go, or you're crushing your opponent and leaving him with no moves or something. And so it doesn't really make sense to try to have end game databases either. And then there's also other factors of the game, which is kind of I think help it make it more comprehensible to humans, and that's that the game kind of moves slower. You won't have something coming across the board and capturing, say, your rook. A bishop flying across from the other side of the board and capturing your rook. So I think humans are better at looking things at a local level, and if things change slower. And in fact, I think that reduces the tactics a little bit and allows for more strategic options. So what do people like about Arimaa? So one of the things is, of course, that a lot of people like it because now here's a chance where they can win against the computer. So that's a really big plus that it has, which you wouldn't be able to do with another game of this that is this small. Also, it's a fairly easy game to learn. Even kids can learn it, and the rules are fairly intuitive. And also, there's not a whole lot of memorizing that you have to do. Like in chess, if you want to get better at chess, you really have to learn a lot of chess openings. And if you don't do that, you're just not going to become a tournament player. And another aspect of it is, sort of really a property of Rema, which we're just kind of starting to find, and that's that, it has a fairly equal winning chances for both players. We don't see any a distinct first move advantage. So that's really a big plus point, because a lot of times, a game has to get tweaked or something if it turns out that the first player or the second player has a big advantage. So we haven't had to do anything in that regard. And then another aspect is that there's no draws in Arima. Actually, initially there used to be draws, but Carl managed to convince me that I had this notion that a really good game would be one where it allowed for draws, but the margin of draw was very, very low. And so, ultimately, you'd want a game where only if the two players played perfectly, it leads to a draw, but anything else would lead to a win for one player or the other. But, the thing is, you could never prove that that's the case. And it's possible for a game to have draw as a final outcome, but yet the ultimate game could be that it's a win for one player or the other. And a good example of that is Connect 4, where it allows for draws, but the ultimate outcome is that it's a win for the first player. So when I consider that, it's like, well, why bother trying to have draws? And also on a practical basis, you don't really want draws, because when you're doing tournaments and things like that, if you end up with a draw, you're going to have to break the draw somehow. So you're going to have to play another game anyhow. Maybe at a faster speed or something like that to break the draw. So you're better off just having the rules be such that there is no draw. So I was convinced of that, and so it wasn't much of a change to the rules for Rema to eliminate draws, because draws hadn't even happened much at all. And then another aspect is that a material setback in Arima is not that decisive. In the outcome of the game. It is, you can build up a material advantage, and, it does help you win. But because the goal of the game is to get a rabbit to the other side, as long as you have a rabbit, and especially an advanced rabbit, you have a fairly good chance. There's times when players will let a bot, a computer, just go ahead and capture pieces left and right, because computers are very greedy, because they can't see too far, and they're instead working on getting a rabbit advanced and finally going and winning the game. So, and that also leads to a lot of drama in the game, where things can go back and forth a lot. And another aspect is that you really don't have to think too deep and to see what's going on in Arima. And really, I don't think I looked more than, say, maybe 2 or 3 moves ahead when making my moves. I'm still able to play fairly well, defeating the computers. And so it makes it interesting, because you don't have to you don't have to be like a grandmaster that has to explain, oh, he did this move now because 7 or 8 moves later it would have led to this if he didn't. You can just see much more quickly, what's happening on the board. And I think that helps make the game a little bit more spectator friendly as well, because it's very easy to follow the game, and also the whole drama aspect of the game where it goes back and forth. I think that also adds to making the game more spectator friendly. Real quick, I'm going to kind of cover some aspects of like the tactics in Arima. I actually started trying to actually build Carl doesn't want me to tell you about the tactics. I think he wants a better chance of winning. Are we? I don't. Well, I started late, so I think I can go till like maybe about 5:15 or 5:20. So it hasn't been an hour. But I just wanted to kind of put these up there so that you kind of get a feel for what kind of things happen in Arima. So since you can capture a piece if it's alone at a track square, a lot of times you want to have two or more pieces around the track square. So that's referred to as mutual protection. But you can have a situation where you do have two pieces around the track square, but both of those pieces are also adjacent to two stronger opponent pieces. And that leads to a situation where your piece will get captured. And we refer to that as false protection. And then you have this concept of fork, where you can hold the piece between two trap squares, and it becomes difficult for your opponent to protect it and protect both of those trap squares. And then there's concept of pin, where a piece is holding, keeping a piece which is on a trap square safe, and so it can't move. So we refer to that piece as being pinned. And the piece which is actually on a trap square is usually held in, and that piece is referred to as being framed. And then there's also the concept of trying to invade your opponent's trap square with your pieces, and then suddenly their pieces are very accessible to being captured on their own side. And then there's also a concept where you can sense a piece such that it's not frozen, but yet it can't escape. And then some of the strategic concepts in Arima, and a lot of these sort of emerged, and initially when we released the game, we didn't even know about these things, and only after a lot of game playing by a lot of people online, we started discovering these. So one of the first things we discovered was this concept called hostage, where you say maybe you have your elephant holding your opponent's camel next to a trap square, such that on the next move the elephant could capture that camel in the trap square, and then your opponent is forced to keep that camel safe by putting his elephant next to the trap square. So in effect, you're holding the camel hostage. So there's that concept. And then another thing we discovered was this concept of a blockade, where if you just put a lot of weaker pieces around, say even an elephant, the elephant could get in a situation where it has no move. And people use that a lot against computers sometimes, purposely sacrificing a piece to get it into a situation where they can blockade it. And then once you have a blockade, then you want to do something like a replacement, where you're freeing up your stronger pieces and replacing them with some of your weaker pieces. So then your stronger pieces are free to roam the board and do more damage. Then there's a concept called swarming, which is where you send in a lot of your pieces forward to sort of overwhelm an opposing elephant, for example, so that there's just too many pieces there and it can't capture any of them. And then there's a concept where you overload, say, a strong piece like an elephant, where it can't defend more than one trap square at the same time. So these are just, and then there's concepts of mobility and how much a free movement your elephant has. So those are just some of the strategic things that we've discovered, and there might be others, and I haven't put everything up here that we know either. Each year we have annual Rema events. There's a World Championship for humans. And Carl, who's sitting here, has actually won the World Championship 2 times, and he's written a book, kind of capturing some of his knowledge about Arima, and included a lot of the history that's occurred in Arima so far. But the current champion this year is actually a fellow named Jean Deligault from France, and he has also won twice. So Carl and Jean are sort of neck to neck in this, and so it's going to be a very interesting championship match this year to see who's going to be, if they're going to win, and one of them becomes a third time World Arena champion, or if it's going to be somebody new. And then also each year we have a Computer World Championship. In the past, David Scotland, who's actually also a developer of one of the world's best Go playing programs, his bot, which is called Bot Bomb, it's been winning consistently year after year. But just last year, it was defeated, but by a program developed by Jeff Thatcher, who's from Canada, and his program is just trounced Bomb, and in fact, it seems that a lot of programs have now passed up Bomb's level. So there's really now several close contenders this year, and they're all very much advanced than the kind of computers that we had just a couple of years ago. And then of course each year we have the Arima challenge match where the best program will play against the group of 3 humans, and it helps us sort of gauge each year where things are, and becomes much more of a sort of a computer science experiment to be able to do it this way. We're able to set up this kind of thing, and we try to have the computers all play on equal hardware, so that things are fair. And the whole Arima community is very intensely focused on making sure things are done fairly. So what's the future of the Rema Challenge look like? One of the things that I was thinking about lately was that could the challenge be achieved if, say, a company threw millions of dollars at it? And thinking about that a little bit, I actually am kind of thinking now that it probably couldn't be, because these kind of AI type problems aren't really something that you can throw a lot of money at to solve. I mean, what it really requires is more sort of like academic breakthroughs and some research type people doing a lot of thinking, and that just kind of happens over time. With people sharing ideas and writing papers on what they've done and what seems to work, and people building on each other's experience. And so I don't think just throwing a lot of money at it is going to do it. And so when would the Rema Challenge be achieved? It's really a difficult thing to say. I kind of designed it so that it could be done if somebody really made a big breakthrough and found a way to bypass this huge roadblock that we've created for doing things using the traditional brute force method of searching through game trees to play games. So if somebody comes up with some software that is very unique and gets past that, then yeah, it could be achieved very quickly. But if not, then I'm kind of thinking that the computer hardware will keep advancing to a point where by about 2020 they might be very close to being able to achieve the Rema Challenge without having made much of an advancement in software. And for me, what's probably more important is how it would be achieved. Like I said, the whole purpose of the Rema Challenge is sort of to fuel innovation. And if it was achieved without having done that, so be it. But if it helps, create some new algorithms or create, some advances in machine learning, then I'd be very happy if it was achieved sooner and contributed. to the field of AI in that way. And then of course there's this question of, well, what happens eventually if computers do achieve the Rema challenge? So do we say computers are then intelligent if they've achieved the Rema challenge? Well, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where I think you're just getting into that is deep blue intelligent kind of a debate again. It's definitely a harder problem than chess was, and so if the computer does get to that level, then I think we've made some progress. But I don't think people would necessarily want to say that the computer is intelligent, even if it does do that. And when I first released Rema, my tagline for it was the game of real intelligence. And actually, when I released it, I was very, very optimistic about how much harder Arimaa is going to be for computers. Sort of based on some testing that I had done with it using zillions of games. But the programmers have found very clever ways to write programs which actually are making the programs play fairly close to pretty good Arimaa human level. So if the computer wins the Rema challenge, I don't think people will necessarily say that it's intelligent. And so what about the future of Rema? Well, it's really hard to predict the future, and I think as Rema starts to grow and things like that, I think it's going to depend more on where the community wants to take it. Already, there's people who are planning to do, say, something like a Rema World League. There's some talk of trying to create something like an international Rema association. We already have something like a one versus the world games going on, and in fact, Carl is on the one side playing against the world in a game. And maybe in the future there might be local Rema clubs. Who knows? So it's really going to depend on what the community wants to do with the Rema. And also, I think the fans and spectators of the game are going to be a very important factor. I mean, even if you don't play Rema, if you just are a fan of it and a spectator, then that also helps to sort of increase the community and the support for the game. And of course, eventually, I'd like to have sponsors that can maybe offer prize money to the world champions in the human tournament and the computer tournament. And doing something like that would probably get more serious players playing the game. So those are some of the kind of things that we're looking forward to in Arimaa. Arimaa offers something for everyone, whether you're a programmer, a player, whether you're just a spectator. There's something that you can try for. And so, where are the future Arimaa players going to come from? Sometimes people think that we should go and promote Arimaa at chess clubs and things like that. I actually don't think that that's a really nice thing to do. And I think chess players are, especially fanatical chess players, are so into their game that they probably don't want to look at another game. But there's actually a lot of people who have played chess and at some point or another sort of gave up on chess because it didn't quite meet what they were looking for. And so if you happen to be somebody that had looked at chess or gave up on chess, then maybe Arimaa is something that you might want to try. Elon Musk, who's founder of PayPal, I was introduced to him through an acquaintance, and he actually mentioned to me that he stopped playing chess when he was a kid because it became clear to him that computers were going to dominate the game. And for me, it was, having to memorize all these openings. I mean, before that, I really wanted to become a good chess player. But then when I hit the point where, to get any better, I needed to memorize all these openings, I just said, this is, not something that I really want to do. So, check out Arimaa. The sets and books are available over at the Z-Man booth. And Carl Yunke is here. He's playing. Also known as Fritz Yunke. He's here, and he's willing to play any number of people that would like to play him simultaneously. And we have some boards set up at the front, and you can go join that and play Carl in a simul. And we have local Dallas Arimaa Club sort of going. We're meeting like once a month in Murphy, Texas. So we'll see where that goes. And you can go also play it online as well. So. And finally, I'm a fan of the Mozilla browser, and I don't know if any of you have seen the Easter eggs in the Mozilla browser. If you have, this might make more sense to you, but if not, you can take it for what it's worth. But it says, the blue beast razed the castle of the believers until their king was doomed to resign, but all was not lost. For from the ashes rose a new tree, its branches increased 1,000-fold. The swarm of 1,000,000 billion leaves, like the wind of a great storm, overloaded the beast's processes. And so at last the beast fell, and the followers of humanity rejoiced. From the Book of Arimaa, 1110, Gold Letter Edition. So, that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, welcome to entertain your questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
You said that you had all the play testing and it was all frustrating, and you put it aside because it wasn't working, and you came back to it and you play tested some more and it still wasn't working, and finally it worked. And then after all that, there was all this work in the website, working, a place to play. More play testing and so on. If you're inventing another game, would it be easy next time, or you just have to go through all that pain?
Oh man, I mean, I went through so much pain, I think, with the first one that, sometimes these ideas pop into my head for another game, but then I just kind of try to suppress it and say, wow, do I want to go through this again? Because the first time I didn't know what I was getting into. But the second time, it's like, whoa, inventing a game, if you're just going to create a game and just put it out there and publish it on a website or something and say, here's the rules, go off and try it, even invent any game is not a lot of effort. It would be nice if you did some play testing and put out something that was worthwhile, but if you really want to put out something that, you think is going to be a really interesting game for people to play and things like that, then you want to do a lot of play testing of it on your own. And then putting a game out is just sort of half the effort. Making a game popular and supporting a game and things like that, that's a whole other aspect of it. So it's a lot of work. And I don't want to discourage anybody that is a game designer. It's just like having a family. The first time you have kids and things like that, you have a lot of energy and you do that, but once you've gone through that whole process and your kids have grown a little bit, you don't really want to go through that again, but you don't want to discourage others from doing that. So that's kind of how I feel about it. So, well, thank you very much for attending, and hope to see you guys in the game hall.